All right, Talisman enthusiasts, let's talk about fate. And this is an important part, piece, aspect, tactica of the game that we want to master, that we want to have some sort of impulse control against, because it's a finite resource that certainly you can use, and you're going to use it, but if you use it at the wrong time in the wrong place, later on in the game, it's really going to come back and hurt you, and could, arguably, depending on if it's the beginning of the game, mid, or end game where you're getting ready to make that run to the Crown of Command, it could cost you the game. So, core Tactica. I've posted up a lot of Tactica vlogs about Talisman up on my channel under the board gaming playlist. And I'm not going to get into knee-deep into the overall Tactica, but I do need to cycle around a little bit because those vlogs are up on the channel. But fate is an important part in understanding the game in that Talisman is a game of random. You have that D6, and it's random. And based on the design of the game, limiting it to a D6, there are some times where you roll 2D6 for places or abilities or stats. But for the most part, it's a D6. And D6 doesn't give you, it only gives you 6 chances. And in Talisman, it's binary in that usually the formula is 1 to 3 bad happens, 4 to 6 good happens, or 1 to 2 bad, 3 to 4 nothing, or 1, 2, 3 bad, 4 nothing, 5, 6 good. That is a very, very limited scope. So with this random, now it's modified up and down where, like for combat, you're going to roll a D6, and then you're going to add on your strength or your magic objects or spell effects. So you can get the modifiers up, or in some cases down if you need to beat something. But it is a random D6 that you roll, and that's the bulk of the number. So what we see right away is the core Tactica to Talisman that ripples through the game, controlling the random. When it's my turn, I want to control that random. I want to try to limit how many dice I roll and the effects of the dice and get a good result and stack it. When it's your turn, I want to influence the random if I can, through spells or other effects. Can I force you to reroll? Can I do crazy stuff? I want to inject that random. So control the random and unleash the random. So fate is going to allow you to reroll, to get a reroll. That's powerful. That is especially powerful in a D6 based system. That, in some circumstances, is game-changing. Now, the challenge with fate, of course, is not all characters have the same fate. And the idea is this is balanced out based on the other stats, although when you run a lot of the characters through a certain matrix to look and see if they are balanced, they're not always balanced. But that's understandable because they have a lot of secondary abilities, say like the spy, the ability to shadow. That really depends if you can have certain circumstances line up where that effectively works. That's different than, say, the warrior that rolls 2d6 for combat. That's always in effect. You're going to fight, you're going to get that bonus. So we'll put aside that fate is balanced out. Different characters start with different fate. But you have that fate pool. When you spend it, it's gone. There are ways to regain fate, but 2 things start to happen here. The first thing that starts to happen is, are you going to be able to hit up that spot to replenish your fate or have an object or item that's going to replenish fate? And second, this is a race-based game. Every turn that you are not building, we're just going to pull it down to the meta. I love exploring the realms. I love getting followers. I love casting spells and seeing what's at the next flip of the card. But ultimately, this is a race-based game where you're racing to the Crown of Command or the alternate ending or whatever that's going to be. So the turns, if you lose a turn, that's big. If you get diverted off your path wherever you are, start of the game, mid-game, or end game, because you got to go get some more fate, that means the other players are potentially pulling ahead. So I don't want to replenish fate unless I don't have to, because it might peel me off or push me off somewhere. Now, when do we use fate? I use fate very rarely in the beginning of the game, because sometimes there's an object you want to acquire. You pull 2 cards, you got to fight a monster, and there's an amazing object, Rune Sword. I'm trying not to give away any objects here. Game-changing object, well, maybe then I'll burn fate. But if it's an average object, I won't if it's a magic object, because there's going to be a lot of other draws moving ahead. Likewise, at the start of the game, if I lose combat, I never want to lose life, because that's a finite resource too. But if I have 4 life, if I have 5 life, as many of the starting characters do, not taking into account the troll, ogres, the minotaur, things like that have higher life, I could take a hit at the beginning of the game. I can control it at the beginning of the game. So I really don't want to spend fate at the beginning of the game. Mid-game and especially end-game, I want to stock a couple of fate points so I can utilize those. Because imagine now I'm in the mid-game. I've got enough strength or craft, depending on the character. I've got a talisman. I've got my followers. I've got a good amount of magic objects. I'm ready to make that run for the Crown of Command. I'm ready to do that. I'm in a good place. Bam! You hit me with a random card. Or if I get toadified, I'm just walking around doing whatever, I get toadified somewhere because of a card that I draw, an adventure card, I need to fate that. If I get toaded, I drop all my stuff, everyone comes in and steals it, everyone steps on me, I try to move around and be near my objects, so when I get untoadified, I can pick them up. That's just a disaster. That's just bad. So I want to have some fate ready to go. Again, controlling the random. If it's your turn, I'm going to hold that random card. I'm going to wait until you're mid-game. Then I'm going to be like, bam, hit you. Now, hopefully you have some fate, or you have some ways to do it. We all see this with the Reaper. I love the Reaper expansion. I consider that an auto-include. You get hit with the Reaper early on, you're like, yeah, it's the lulls, and you have a laugh. You get hit with the Reaper, that's a lot of trouble. We had one game where I had high fate, and my buddy had high fate. He hits me with the Reaper. Bam, I'm hit with the Reaper. I roll it, and now if I got killed, I'd absolutely fate that. But I send it to, your opponent. Bam, I send it to my opponent. Send it to him, because he moved it on me. He rolls, and whatever he got, he didn't get killed, but he's like, okay, I re-roll. He sends it back to me. I roll, and I was like, okay, now I got killed, so I re-roll. Now I send it back to him. We blew fate like 3 or 4 turns to send the Reaper back and forth, and eventually we sent it to somebody else, and they got killed. So that's an example where you are very, very vulnerable mid to end game. The duality is you think you're jacked up. You think you're ready to go, make that run for the crown, and you're solid, you're strong. There's enough wacky random stuff. I need to control it. Now, I could get toadified, draw the witch, I get toadified, I re-roll, I get toadified again. I mean, that's Talisman, you kind of nerd rage a little bit. It happens. I can only control so much, but fate is an important thing to keep, to maintain, and to always have a little bit in reserve as best you can. Some only have 1 fate point, it gets drained through an event, or you had to use it, it's gone. But if you have 2 or 3, I always like to go the ideal aside, because it's not always possible. Mid to end game, I always like to have 1 or 2 fate ready to go, or 1 or 2 spells that let me simulate fate, or let me have an object, Lucky Charm, the Clover, being able to control a die that's similar like fate, something literally in my Talisman pocket, ready to go, so this way I'm in a good place and I can control that. Understanding fate and the manipulation of the D6, that tactic alone and showing some impulse control will put you so far ahead in the game, much, much more than you realize.